Hi, everyone. We're going to give a few more people, two more, maybe 3 minutes to join the webinar. So please hang in there with us. Okay, Sean, I'm going to go ahead and kick the webinar off. Hello, everyone. My name is Dean Burns. We have had a tremendous amount of success doing webinars, and so this is our fourth or fifth webinar about the Ocumetics accommodating IOL. And today I want to do something a little bit different in that I want to give you some major updates that have occurred over the last month or so, and then try to explain some of those updates. I'll go through a presentation that will help me with that explanation, but what I really want to do is leave time at the back end for any questions that you may have. So from a housekeeping perspective, you can put your questions in the chat, and my colleague Sean will read those questions off to me so that I can focus on the presentation and maybe assimilating an answer that will help address your question. And we'll do that back and forth until there are no more questions, and then we'll close out the webinar. By way of a disclaimer, by law, I have to abide by whatever the guidelines are from the TXS venture. And so these are just the disclaimers associated with that. If you don't hear anything else that I say tonight, take these three messages home with you. First of all, I cannot tell you how excited Ocumetics is. We are literally 7 days away from putting this technology in a human eye. And I'm going to pause for a second just to allow that to sink in. There are a lot of companies that go down this pathway. Very few get to this point where they are going into a first in human type study, and very few even go into and out of a first in human study into an FDA phase 3 study. We are well on our way, and I just cannot tell you, I'm so proud of my team, and I'm so excited to be able to share that with you. So we're 7 days away from implantation into a human, and this is an incredible time for the Ocumetics company because many of you don't realize that the company is an 18-year-old company. It started off as just a research company looking into how to design and manufacture different types of eye care products, specifically intraocular lenses. So for the last 18 years, Dr. Garth Webb has been pushing forward with his idea of what would make what he refers to as the perfect IOL. And the definition of a perfect IOL is not the construction and manufacturing of the IOL, it's the one that works the best in the eye. And so that's what we are in pursuit of, an IOL that gives a patient vision in the distance, intermediate, and near, and it does it really, really well. So for 18 years, we have been in pursuit of this. The study that we are actually getting ready to go into is a study that will cover over 30 subjects. Now, that's a big number for us because originally we were only going to do a first in human study with 12 subjects. We expanded it out to include 30 subjects because there are quite a few things that we actually want to see and we want to study before we go into an FDA phase 3 study. So we are so super excited, and we have to pinch ourselves because it's taken us a while to get here. One of the other areas that's really exciting right now is Ocumetics has been putting out a tremendous amount of news over the last month or so. So far, we have released over 8 press releases, which are major press releases. And I'm going to go through what those announcements were, not in excruciating detail where I actually read the announcement, but I'm going to give you the highlights of what those announcements were intended to do. But we put out over 8 announcements. Now, here's the really exciting stuff. Our stock, the trajectory is going in the right direction. It continues to go up and show some stability. But as we get ready to go in and out of our first in human study, the evaluation of the company will actually go up. So we are also in the process of not only going into first in human, but we're in the process of raising money as a research organization startup. We're always raising money. So we announced in one of the press releases that we're doing a private placement. So if there's anybody who's on the call that's interested in getting a subscription to that private placement, please also put that in the chat so that we can make sure that we reach out to you and you can take advantage of that opportunity. All right. So let's talk just real quickly. Why are we doing what we're doing? We're not a problem looking for, we're not a solution looking for a problem. We're actually trying to fix the problem that we all face, and that's the restoration of sight as we age. What do you mean, Dean? Well, when you're young and you have what we refer to as normal vision, the colors are vibrant. The detail is incredible. Your Z factor, which is that three-dimensional look and feel in your eyesight, that depth of focus is really, really good. And it doesn't matter whether it's daytime vision, which you see color with, or nighttime vision, which you see 256 shades of gray. It doesn't really matter. When you're young, your vision is good. In fact, we actually take for granted how well we see when we're young. Well, it's not until we begin to age where that vision begins to deteriorate. And it's not until we get into a cataract state where we say, oh my God, I can barely see. And it's funny because I talk to a lot of people and they'll tell me what their numbers are and they'll say, hey, I'm really blind. They can actually see, but they don't function. Their quality of life is just not the way it was when they had normal vision. So the problem is we're trying to figure out the best way to restore sight as we age. There are 2 conditions that most of us in the clinical world and in the scientific world look at. One is called presbyopia. The other one is called cataract disease. Presbyopia just basically is a condition very similar to myopia or hyperopia, where the lens loses its ability to accommodate. Now, your question should be, what is accommodate? That's really a clinical term, but what accommodation is is the ability of the eye to see in the distance, intermediate for like computer type work, or up close to read your cell phone or a book or what have you, anything that you're doing close up. And you don't even have to think about it. The brain and the eye work so well together that they just automatically make that happen. Well, that process actually starts deteriorating at the age of 45. And it gets worse to the point where you now have to go to your big box store or drugstore or your doctor's office and say, hey, my reading is not as good as it used to be. And they will prescribe to you some readers. And those readers actually have numbers. So it can be less than one and it can be as high as three. It just depends on what you need to bring that image closer to your eyes. And that whole process is called accommodation, and the condition is called presbyopia. So it's not like you have the cooties or a big disease. It's just the aging process of the eye. Well, presbyopia pushes forward to enter into a cataract disease state. And what is that? Well, I've already talked about the ability of the lens to allow you to see in the distance, intermediate, and near. When you have a cataract, that lens that is no longer flexible starts to get cloudy. And when it gets cloudy, that's where you cannot really see or resolve the images that you used to be able to see. And if left untreated, the patient will go blind. It's not if, you will go blind. It is the one eye condition that we actually can treat and totally reverse, which is why most of the population in countries that have access to this technology, those aging patients do extremely well. It's the underdeveloped countries that don't have access because of resources to this kind of technology that they suffer through blindness due to a cataract. And that happens at about 65. The evolution of eye care is kind of interesting. I've been through every bit of this, but it all started with spectacles. So you can go back to, the late 1800s and find a spectacle as uh, that tool to actually correct any kind of eyesight. Well, we went from spectacles to contact lenses to laser refractive surgery, both for hyperopia, which means that you're farsighted, so you see really well in the distance, and nearsighted, which means you see really close up, but you need to get that corrected to see in the distance. We can correct that now with a laser, but we've moved into another area of eye care with these really fantastic premium lenses that give us multifocality or multifocal lenses. Now, these lenses that we have today are what we call fixed focus lenses. In other words, we give you distance, intermediate, and near, and we make that occur on the optic itself. But because of what we're doing to the treatment of the optic, we're also introducing things that you've never had to deal with before in your vision, which is nighttime visual disturbances like the glare, halo, and starbursts are the top three. Along came this whole concept of accommodating lenses, which basically try to mimic the natural lens that's in the crystalline eye. And I have a couple slides here in the deck that will actually showcase what that is. So accommodative IOLs have been around since 2002, with the very first accommodating IOL, the crystalline lens, being approved by the FDA. That lens was promoting that they would give at least up to a diopter worth of what we refer to as accommodative amplitude. But it didn't do that. It actually didn't work because of how the lens was designed. The concept and the idea was spot on. It was very, very, very good. But the execution and implementation of the lens made it a non-functioning technology in the eye. Now, the patients didn't get hurt. They just didn't get what was promised, and that was a design lens that mimics the natural biokinetics of the eye. Dr. Webb came up with a different design, which is really the CAD drawing on the right-hand side of your screen, which is called a dynamic adaptive accommodative IOL. This prototype has actually tested on the bench to give up to 12 diopters worth of accommodating amplitude. Now, keep in mind, you won't put 12 diopters in a patient's eye because the patient wouldn't like it and the brain would just go haywire because that's too much. But we could put 2, 3, or 4 diopters in the optical pathway, and the eye will love it. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. All right. So I've got to give you a anatomy lesson for those of us who are not clinical. So this is a picture. It's a cross section of the eye. So way up here where my pointer is where the cornea is. Down deep in this area is where the cataract would be. And we call this the crystalline lens, this area right here. The crystalline lens is attached to this orange structure by these little yellow fingers called zonules. And this orange structure is called the ciliary muscle. So the eye has muscles that do different things. This particular muscle is responsible for allowing you to accommodate and disaccommodate. So when you look in the distance, and this naturally occurs, when you look in the distance and you look at the picture on the left-hand side of the screen where my pointer is, you'll notice I've got this yellow line here to show that that lens, that part of the lens, if it was the whole picture, is thinner than the lens on the right. The reason for that is that lens is under tension, and you can see how straight these finger-like projections are, where that structure is being stretched to flatten out the lens. That's what allows you to see in the distance. Well, when you see up close, that structure relaxes. So that's what the clinical artist is showing here, is that the zonules are relaxed and that lens has gotten fat. That distance between thin and fat is what we call accommodation, or the natural biomechanics of the eye. Now, that's a lot to take in if you're not a clinical person, but everybody's eye is just like this. So whether it's me or whether it's you, we all go through this same process. Well, when you're laying down, which is what this shows, the process is still the same when you sit up. So this is the eye just looking straight out, kind of in a seating position. And on this side, you can actually see that this lens is skinnier than the one on this side. And that skinny lens gives us the ability to naturally see in distances when the lens is naturally flattened out. When the lens is relaxed, which you see on this side, it's the same lens, it's just half of a picture. It gives us the natural ability to see close up when the lens is fat. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because of how we structured and designed our dynamic Ocumetics dynamic accommodating IOL. When it's a 2-lens structure, when the anterior and the posterior side of the structure come close together and even touch each other, it's under tension here. So that natural crystalline lens has been removed. We put our lens in that same space and it sits in this bag structure. That's how we get it into the eye. Well, when those two lenses come together, that gives us the ability to see in the distance. So if we're in our car driving, we can see in the distance crystal clear. The sky is great. We can see details on the road because of how that lens is working. Well, when the lens relaxes and we need to see up close, the two lenses spread apart from each other. And this happens automatically. You don't have to worry about making this happen. Well, when that happens, it gives you the ability to see up close and intermediate. And that's why we call it a dynamically occurring, accommodating IOL. It gives you dynamic vision at different focal points, and it does it by itself. So your eye and your brain are working in harmony, which is what biokinetics is. Your eye and your brain and all the structures that support that are working in harmony to give you that kind of vision. So where are we along that journey of putting this lens into a human eye? I showed you this chart probably 2 webinars ago, and it was all the activities that we needed to accomplish, all of the milestones that we needed to accomplish to get into our first in-human study. So we have submitted, and if you go around the ring, it's exciting. We've submitted our protocol, and we're waiting to receive our IRB approval. We've conducted our site inspection, and we've got the training for how we're going to do our surgeries, which is in our protocol. We will finish the sign-off of the site inspection. So the site inspection starts on the 26th. We'll finish the sign-off on the site inspection the day we're there to do first surgery. They are already recruiting patients, so they know the patients that they want to do. And the study, the way we're doing it is we've divided it up into 3 distinct groups, and there are 3 distinct things that we're trying to study. So the first group of patients, we want to study safety, and we want to make sure that they have great distance vision. The second group of patients, we want to study safety, distance vision, and also the accommodative amplitude value that we get out of our lens. So that's the second group. The third group, we want to study safety, the refractive distance. So we want to make sure that their vision in the distance is great. We want to make sure that we do have accommodative amplitude, and we want to know how much that is. And we want to do what's called binocular summation. And that is, we want to put 2 of the Ocumetics lenses in a patient to make sure that the lenses and the brain are working close together, which is why we decided to make it a bigger study than just putting it in an eye and making sure that we had safety parameters and some performance out of the eye. We really want to make sure that the lens is doing exactly what we've advertised it to do, and that we know how much. Because it's not until you get into a clinical study do you really get to measure all of this stuff. You can measure it on the bench, but so what? The bench is not living tissue, and it's not until you get it into living tissue do you really get to see what that lens is capable of doing. So what is the news that we have made with the technology over the last month or so? So it starts really on May the 8th with this particular press release. The highlight of that press release is that in the laboratory with our molds, we were able to demonstrate the refractive and accommodative power of our lens, which is pretty exciting. How did we do that? Well, we did that by measuring every lens that we had and that we would eventually use in the first in-human study to make sure that it met certain parameters and to make sure that it was consistent from lens to lens. And so this chart means nothing to anybody on this call other than me. It shows me the lines here. So we want to have, lines that are going parallel with each other and not crossing over to each other. But it tells me that the quality of the lens surface is excellent. It tells me that there's a homogeneous value associated with how it looks. And the value of that is measured with this this unit of measurement, which is called the modulation transfer function. And it shows me on the chart the quality of the lens. So we were able to demonstrate that successfully, which gave us the confidence that it's now time to put this lens in a human eye. The next press release came out on the 12th, and that press release talked about we've optimized the lens prototype design and that we have frozen that design. And we make lenses two ways. One, we have a 3D printer, which allows us to just kind of simulate what the lens is going to look like. And then we send that 3D printed image off, and we have these molds created. These are high quality optical molds. The center part, so these posts fit down inside a jig, and the center part is the optic that is made. Well, this thing is polished, it is sophisticated, it's very fragile, and we have dropped it on the floor and we had to go get new molds made. But it is what allows us to make our insert for the Ocumetics lens, that clear part that allows you to see. So these molds are extremely expensive. To make one takes probably 6 weeks of lead time to do so, and they come from overseas. So we've got to put a lag time in to import them back to the US, which I'm so happy that we have these lenses in Mexico right now, because to get them in the US with all the tariff stuff that's going on would just be incredible. So on the 14th of May, we sent out a press release talking a little bit about our manufacturing process. We manufacture our lenses in two places. One is in Monterrey, Mexico, which is where our design engineering team is located. So none of this is made in Canada or the US. So the lenses are designed in Monterrey, Mexico. They are also designed in Erlangen, Germany. Now, that seems weird to have two manufacturing groups that are so far apart from each other. Let me see if I can decode it and help everyone on the call why that makes sense. We did not, when I came on board from Alcon, one of the things that I did at Alcon was I made sure that we didn't have any kind of supply chain interruptions as we were looking to drive whatever that product was for surgery. As you know, when you go into surgery, you want to make sure that the product is on the shelf and it's the right product, and you just go pick it off the shelf and put it in the patient's eye. Well, if you have a supply chain interruption, you don't know really where the problem is. Is the problem down in shipping at the hospital level, or is the problem at the company DC, or is the problem basically at the manufacturing location trying to get those products out? So what we decided to do is that we would have a joint agreement with two manufacturing facilities, none of which Ocumetics owns, but we do have contracts in place for both of them, where we do our prototype design and manufacturing in Monterrey, Mexico. We send it to Erlangen, Germany for verification. They send it back and say, yep, we got the same numbers that you guys got. We're ready to go. Well, the facility in Erlangen, Germany is a large manufacturer. So when we scale, we've already got our manufacturing facility ready to go, and they are FDA cleared to scale, so that we will not have any interruptions of manufacturing with our accommodative lens. So we've got both of those facilities in place. So the announcement here was to say that we were able to successfully manufacture I can't say it's a commercially viable lens, but it's pretty close to a commercially viable piece of technology, but it's going to be used in our first in-human study. So how were we able to get there? Well, we went to Israel and we bought a technology called the Iola. The Iola is a lens analyzer. It's a very sophisticated, very expensive piece of equipment that allows us to measure 100% every lens that we manufacture. And if the lens does not meet our specifications, we just kick it out. It's not going to be a part of any kind of technology that will go into a human eye. We do not want to do our R&D on humans. We want to make sure that if it's my loved one or your loved one, they're getting the absolute best product that money can buy. And so we scan each and every lens that is manufactured, and we do it with the Iola, which is pictured here. All right. On the 22nd of May, we let you guys know that we have submitted to the IRB for our regulatory approval. This is the ethics group that basically looks at our protocol. They look at our surgeon handbook. They look at how we manufacture the product. They pretty much look at everything, and they give us a ruling on we can go or no go. We've got a preliminary ruling. It looks really good. We're just waiting for our letter of approval so we can put that into our file because everything has to be well documented just in case the FDA wants to take a look at it. But this was pretty significant because this took literally 6 months to create. And that protocol is how we manage those patients. Dr. Doyle Stalting, who is our chief medical officer, and our regulatory partner have responsibility. It's a fiduciary thing, have responsibility for all of our patients. And so, we've got insurance to make sure that things go well, but they have to manage through any kind of challenges. And so all of those challenges or risks are baked into our protocol, which is what is being evaluated right now. Now, here's the cool thing. We're doing our first in human study in Mexico. Now, we had announced maybe 120 days ago that we would actually do the first in human in the Dominican Republic. Because of a regulatory change and our original plan, we had to actually relocate our first in human to another site. And there are 5 or 6 sites around the world that do first in humans. Mexico's one, Dominican Republic is one. They do them in Jamaica, they do it in Panama, they do it in Costa Rica. All of those sites are very good sites, but some are better with whatever the technology is. So from an IOL perspective, Mexico does a extremely good job because they have really good surgeons down there that can do cataract surgery. If it was a knee implant and we had to do first in human on that, Jamaica's a good place for that because of the athletes and the lifestyle of some of the people down there. They have doctors, orthopedic surgeons that are really good that are in that space. So we selected Mexico, and so we put that press release out just to let you guys know where the study was being done, and the fact that there was a change from the Dominican Republic. On June the 3rd, we announced the actual start date for our first in human. And so there's a whole ton of activity that is taking place to get us to the point where we actually do surgery and put the lens in a patient's eye. But we wanted to tell you when that was going to occur. And so June 26th, which is 7 days away, I guess, is when that whole thing's starting. I just got my flights today. So I am pretty locked in and wired to see this happen and to realize all the work that's been done over 18 years. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the shareholders that invested in Ocumetics early on, thank you so much for believing in Dr. Webb and believing in this company. It has been a long journey for you guys. I realize that, and I don't take that lightly. I've been with the company for 2 years, and I've been at the helm during that time. And I can only imagine how you guys feel knowing that you invested money, but you really didn't have a good feel for where we were. When I came on board, I told you in one of my CEO letters that I was going to communicate. I just believe in being transparent. And if you ask me something, if I can answer it, I will. If it's a question that will clinically or financially get me in trouble, I'll tell you I can't answer it because I'll get in trouble. Orange is not a good color, which is why I have this colored shirt on tonight for the webinar. I don't have anything orange and I don't want to wear anything orange, but I wanted to say thank you for hanging in there with us. So our first in human kicks off in 7 days. And here again, if you're thinking about getting involved with the organization, you can buy on the open market or you can get involved in the private placement, which I'll mention here in a couple minutes. Actually, it's this slide here. So we announced on July the 4th that we were doing a private placement. And the goal is a $2.1 million during that raise. The reason we did this was we wanted to make sure that two things could occur. One, we had enough funding to actually get through the first in human. When we changed locations, we actually picked up a significant amount of expense to do that. But that's okay because you expect that. But we want to make sure that we actually get through the entire study and that we are positioned to do our regulatory submission to the FDA for the multi-center clinical phase 3 FDA study, which will occur after this study. So just to help everyone who's on the call with the process, FDA has a very well-defined process. If you ever want to look it up, you can just go to fda.gov. Clinical studies, and it will actually take you through that. You can also do that on YouTube. But the process is you do biocompatibility, so that's a safety study. You have to pass that. If you don't pass that, there's not a snowball's chance in hell you'll get an approval on any kind of product, which means you can't commercialize any kind of device or pharmaceutical product anywhere, not to mention just the US. A lot of the countries now index off of FDA data and FDA studies. So your chances of being commercial are really limited. You get through that, you go into first in human or a pilot study. We're going into first in human. We've expanded our study from 12 to 30 because there's some specific things that we want to know about this technology before we go into an FDA 3-phase study. So we want to make sure that we have enough money to get through all the regulatory stuff to get into that process. So we announced a private placement on June the 4th, which consists of 30 cents a unit for Ocumetics with a half a warrant attached to that. Anybody who's interested in getting involved in that, just please put in the chat, hey, I'm interested in the private placement. I need someone to call me and leave your contact information. So if it's an email, leave the email. If it's a phone number, please leave that, and we'll make sure our finance team reaches out to you and does that. All right. So where are we? Well, if you look at the milestones and what our projections are, we've actually done a really good job managing the funds that have come into Ocumetics. So in 20 22. That's kind of when I got on board really with the company as a consultant. We were still going through our proof of concept. In 23, we were finishing up our biocompatibility animal study. In 24, we were doing all the necessary work to get into our first in human study, including all of the pre-manufacturing things that we had to do. And so in 25, in less than 7 days, guys, counting down, we're raising capital to get us through our first in human. So the total raise that we want to do is 3.5 million, but the private placement that we announced is 2.1. And so, we're going to do it in tranches and make sure that we get it through. And then when we get into the multi-center clinical trial, we've projected out that it's going to be a $30 million study. And then when we get approval and early commercialization, we estimate that we're going to need about $44 million to do that. A lot of that is manufacturing and standing up an organization, which is not a insignificant proposition. But there's some other things that we're looking at as part of our extra strategy that I'm not at liberty to talk about right now. But standing up an organization is one of those options. Partnering with other organizations is another option. Totally selling out and selling the technology off along with all the patents, that's another option. So we've got a lot of things that are in our tool bag for the organization. And here again, I'll go back and repeat what I said. There are a lot of companies that don't even get to this point in their journey to get something approved. And we are just so blessed and fortunate to be at this location. Why are we in this market? And I'll finish up with these couple slides. Well, if you do a total addressable market, the intraocular lens space is a $4.5 billion space. The refractive component, which are those patients that are in that 45 year of age category, is a $1.7 billion category, and the cataract space is a $1.2 billion space. When we launch, we're going into the cataract space, but we do have other technologies that allows us to cross over and get into the refractive space. So we're not just a one product pony. We have other technologies in the bag to do so. If you just look at market size based on procedures, in the US, it's about 4 million cataract procedures performed annually. Globally, it's about 30 million. The average price of current IOLs, if it's a monofocal lens, which sometimes we refer to as a government reimbursed lens, it's $150. But if you look at the premium category, that same lens is $2,000, or same type of lens is $2,000. What does that mean from a revenue perspective? Well, for monofocals, it's basically $500 million, $500 million. For the premium category, it's $2.3 billion sector. So it's pretty significant, and that's why we are in this space. Here's just an example of a calculation that we did just to showcase revenue opportunity for Ocumetics, and this is just with one product. It's $400 million or $488 million opportunity at a 40% share of the $1.2 billion category. If we combine cataract and refractive, so we go down to the 45 years of age, it's a $1.1 billion revenue opportunity for Ocumetics. So it's huge for us. For those of you who have never had the pleasure of meeting me, I would love to meet everyone that I talk to. My name is Dean Burns, and I spent 28 years of my career. I've been in medical for 40, but 28 of the 40 was spent with a company called Alcon Vision, which is the largest eye care company in the world. During my tour of duty, I did a lot of different things. But during my tour of duty, my last assignment was I was responsible for the largest business unit in our surgical division, which is about $750 million worth of top line business with a gross margin of about 65 to 70%. And the categories were devices, disposables, IOLs, and pharmaceuticals. So I've got a very vast background, and I have 15 FDA approvals with 15 launches. And if you put the commercial value of the approvals and launches, it's about $6 billion worth of commercial value or commercial based activity. So I've had the pleasure of doing a lot of stuff. Usually people in my age group and at least in the area of my management, they get one or two type approvals. I was blessed and fortunate to get 15, and I have those little trophies on my wall. Every once in a while, I'll go in my office and just kind of reminisce back to when we were trying to make eye care a much better place, and to be able to sit back and see how well the industry has gone is pretty good. So I am pretty fortunate to be in this position doing what I do. Last but certainly not least, there are 14 companies in this space that have interest in accommodating IOLs. 6 of the 14 are listed on this slide. 5 of the 6 utilize silicone oil in their technology because of how their lens is designed to work. And I will not say that these lenses are broken or bad. I will say that I think our mousetrap is so much better. And not only from a manufacturing perspective, but also from a patient perspective, the way it's set up. It's a one-piece shape changing IOL. It has no silicone oil in it. Silicone oil is toxic to the body. If you don't believe me, just Google it and look at what happened in the plastics industry with silicone oil implants. Most companies got away from those implants and started promoting saline over all of that. Our technology mimics the biokinetics of the eye a lot better, at least from a design perspective. From a clinical perspective, we can't talk about that until we do our studies. But from a design perspective, it does that really well. It's designed to accommodate up to 12 diopters on the bench. We will not put 12 diopters in a patient's eye because the eye and the brain won't take that. But the other cool thing is, and nobody talks about it but us, is this whole notion of disaccommodation. So you accommodate by looking close, but when you bring your head up and you want to see in the distance, your eye does that. You can do it right now while you're on this call. The eye does it, and the brain works with the eye, and you don't even think about it, and it does it very fast. Well, when you put the lenses in, they have to do it just as fast. So we have been working on making sure that our lens is designed to disaccommodate in less than a second. We believe it's a safety feature. And the safety is simply this. If you're driving your car and you're looking down through the windshield down the road, and you have to look either at your instrument panel or your phone, and then you look back up, you want to make sure that as you transition through those focal points, that happens really fast. If it doesn't, you're looking through a blurry media, and that's not good. So, we're the only company that's actually talking about how quickly we do that. And it's super, super wonderful. Here's our value statement. I just basically said the same thing. And with that, I will stop and take questions. Sean, are you there?
Hi, Dean. Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Jewett. I'm part of the marketing team here at Ocumetics. Just some initial clarification on the private placement. The unit price for that is 35 cents. If you guys are interested in getting more information on the private placement, you can just add a question to the Q&A section. We do have your email. So just, add a question in there saying that you're interested in the private placement. If you prefer a phone call, just pop your number in there. And then if you would like more information right away on the private placement, you can always go to our website, ocumetics.com. And in the investors section, you'll be able to see the news release we have with all the information on the private placement.
Perfect.
So with that said, I will get to some of these questions, Dean.
Excellent.
The first one here is from David. He says, are the powers in the world really going to allow such a device to be released? By that, I mean, folks will lose their livelihood like eye practitioners.
So let me answer David's question this way. First of all, yes, because the practitioners will be the ones who will be responsible for implanting the technology in patients' eyes. So their base of business will actually grow because they will have a demand signal coming from the market saying, hey, I want that lens and I want to be able to see that way and I want that quality of life. So it's actually good not only for the manufacturers, us, but it's actually good for the patients and the practitioners who will be responsible for managing those patients through that process.
Awesome. Okay, this next question is from Pam. So if all goes well with the testing in this round, when can I expect to have the surgery done for my eyes, whether it be in Canada or elsewhere in the world?
The week doesn't go by that I get 5 or so of these types of emails, which is good. So when we get through our multi-center, when we get through first in human, which will be in Mexico, we will go into the multi-center clinical trial. There are 13 sites that have been identified to be a part of that. I can tell you tonight that 2 of the sites will be in Canada because we're a Canadian-based company. But a lot of that, because it's an FDA study, will be done here in the US. And then we have 1 or 2 sites that are kind of sprinkled, 2 in Europe. And we have one of the first in human sites that wants to remain an active site. And I have to think through how I want to do that. So when we announce the multi-center clinical trial, I don't know where you are, and please don't tell me, but you will begin to see, I call them recruitment commercials about a clinical study with this type of lens. If you're interested, please let us know. And typically it's a radio, TV, film kind of thing. It's also social media. So just stay tuned for that kind of stuff. The time frame is usually a year after we finish up the first in human. So we'll start this study and we'll finish up with recruiting and surgery and follow-up and everything associated with that, probably by first or second quarter of next year. And then we'll submit to the FDA.
Awesome. Okay, the next question is from P. What is the accommodation amplitude of the lens?
So the lens that we are taking into any of the clinical studies, whether it's first in human or the multi-center clinical trial, will go from 0 to 3.5.
Cool. Here's another common question from Lay. I'm interested in being on the list of trials. Are there still spots left?
We haven't started them. So the only group of spots you can't be on is the first in human group, because we have no control over that. That's all being done in Mexico. Once we get into the multi-center clinical trial and we start announcing the cities and countries where the trial is going to be, that's when you can start reaching out to those clinics to see if you could get on the list. Now, keep in mind, just because your name goes on a list doesn't mean that you'll be in the trial, because they'll have to take you through a battery of tests to make sure that your eye health is where it should be. So for example, if you have systemic issues with your eye, so you're diabetic and you have diabetic retinopathy, that might be an exclusion factor because that becomes a retina issue that has to be dealt with. If you have severe dry eye as a result of either previous refractive surgery or allergies or what have you, you'll have to get the dry eye under control first before you can be a part of any clinical study. And then lastly, if you have pressure issues like glaucoma, etc., you'll have to get your pressures underway before you have surgery. And the reason for that is if you have an underlying unhealthy issue, it only gets magnified when you put these high performance lenses in your eye.
Gotcha. Okay. The next question here is from Chris. Will this lens also help or do away with those darn floaters we all seem to have the pleasure of having as we age?
All right, so I'm laughing because I got that question last week. Actually, I was on a phone call when one of the guys I was talking to said, "Hey, I got floaters, and I was told that with cataract surgery I could get rid of floaters." So let me try to dispel floaters real quick. As we age, there's another part of the eye called the vitreous, and that's the back part of the eye. So you got the vitreous, and then you have the retina. As we age, that substance that holds the eye and keeps it in shape, it's where the white part of the eye is, it starts to liquefy. And because of just normal activities, moving your head, sometimes a little piece of vitreous will pull off, which creates what we refer to as floaters. So what you're actually seeing, because the vitreous is clear, but what you're actually seeing is the shadow of the vitreous as it travels across your eye. So will cataract surgery get rid of floaters? Absolutely not.
That's too bad. Okay. The next one here is from Paul. Will you have any 1 week preliminary results, follow-up reports upon the first patient's surgery?
Yeah, so the timeframes that we use, that's actually a really good question. The timeframes that we use are 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. A patient doesn't get best corrected vision until 1 month post-surgery. So 1 day and 1 week, we're just making sure that they don't have any inflammation, they don't have an infection, they can actually see and resolve images decently. And if there's inflammation there that we know about it, we hit it pretty hard with whatever drugs we do. And if it's an infection, we'll hit it with antibiotic. If it's inflammation, we'll try to knock it down with steroids. So 1 week and 1 day and 1 week, that's all we're looking for. We're not pushing this vision. Where you see the best vision occurring is 1 month. So we will be able to talk about 1 month, 3 months, 6 month data following surgery. But we won't push vision in that 1 and 7 day visit.
Makes sense. Okay, the next question here is from Dayton. Assuming the first in human trials are successful, what do you think the fair value of the technology would be at that time?
So if I had a crystal ball, which is kind of what Dayton is asking for, it wouldn't surprise me if the value of our stock was not right at or close to $1. So double where we are today. And one of the things that we don't talk about, but I'll just kind of mention it, the strategic companies, the big seven, are looking at small companies like Ocumetics to see how our first in human goes. So I get messages from the CEOs of some of the bigger strategic companies, basically saying, "Hey, congratulations getting to this endpoint. We are wishing success for your first in human." and come back and talk to us when you get, here again, your 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month data set from those patients. So it wouldn't surprise me if we didn't double or triple our number.
Very exciting. This one is kind of related to that. This is from Robert. If these first in human trials are more than moderately successful, what would lead to the possibility you suggested of having another company buying the technology and the patents? And what kind of pricing would you be looking for?
Okay, so I won't answer the what kind of pricing am I looking for, because there's too much variability there. But um, if you just wanted to do the back of a napkin type calculation, we have 119 million shares outstanding. If we sold at a 3x multiple, that means that our shares would, if we got it to $1, that means that our shares would sell at $3 a share, times that amount. So we'd be in that $300 million range, just south of 400 million for the technology. And keep in mind, a lot of people don't realize this. We have 49 patents on this technology. 3 are what we refer to as a provisional patent, which means that not only is it on the product, like it's on the iPhone, but it's how we made the iPhone. So the provisional patent covers everything, and we have prior art, so it really keeps the competition at bay. So it would not surprise me that we could be somewhere in that $200 to $400 million area when we sell the company.
Very cool. All right. This next question is from Matthias. From this first in human study and barring FDA approval, when do you expect to have international rollout as a complete product?
Okay, so that's a two-part question. I'm going to answer it using the timelines that we have. So FDA has a very specific timeline for how we do studies. You can't accelerate it. It is what it is. So it's a 3-year process. So from the time we finish up our first in human, which is going to take, let's just say 9 months to get through the entire process. So once we finish up the clinical stuff with the patient, we have to create the clinical report. We have to submit what's called an IDE application, which IDE stands for Investigational Device Exemption, to the FDA. They have up to 90 days to respond to that. Once we get the go-ahead, we have to select the sites, we have to do site initiation, we have to train everybody, and then we have to actually start recruiting, which takes probably another 45 to 60 days to do. So the whole process now has been 9 months plus 60 days. So almost a year. Once we get started, it's a phase 3 process. Phase 1, you don't, and usually you have to do like 400 subjects. Phase 1, the FDA will say, okay, I want you to do 40 to 50 subjects. So we do those subjects. We have to turn that data into the FDA and give them time to review it, for them to come back and give us the go-ahead to go to phase 2 and phase 3. Once we get into phase 2 or phase 3, we can take phase 1 data and start looking around the world for those countries that have very friendly regulatory bodies, to see if we can get an exemption called CE marking, so that we can do early commercialization of this technology. And if we are successful with doing that, then we can actually, 18 months after we start this study, be in places around the world with this lens, early commercialization. with CE marking on the lens. But we have to go through the process, and everybody is indexing off of FDA data. So it's not like they're going to say, hey, just come in our country and you can sell this lens. They're going to say, if you want to sell this lens in our country, show us the data. Not show the money, show us the data. And so that's why that first phase is so important, because we'll have data on 50 patients, plus what we did with the first in human study.
Cool. This one, you kind of spoke to this already just regarding patents, but this is a question from Garth. He asks, when do patents start and end? How easy would it be for others to make generic copies of the technology?
Yeah, so as we know, there's a time limit on an exclusive time limit on patents themselves. And sometimes it's 10 years, sometimes it's 15 years. It just really depends on the patent. If you're smart, which Dr. Webb has been super smart, you keep tweaking your patents. So it's kind of like you don't rest on the initial patent, you make it better and you refile it. And that way you get a new timeline and you get a fresh look at what that technology is capable of doing. The best example I can give anybody on this call is how the car manufacturers evergreen their product lines. So they'll come in with the technology in a car and they'll kind of commercialize it and sell it. And then they'll come in either higher or lower with another model, or they'll go side to side. And so we will use that type of thought process to keep the Ocumetics patent portfolio up to date, so that we don't have to worry about the whole generic area. And so it all starts with prior art. It all starts with the initial provisional patent. It all starts with, do you have patent protection around the world? There's certain countries, quite honestly, it doesn't matter where you go, you don't have patent protection, even though the law says you do. So I won't go into China right now. I won't go into India right now. I won't go into Russia right now. And the reason is, it's not because those markets are not huge. They are huge. But we would spend basically all the money in the piggy bank just defending patents and suing them. It wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to control where the technology goes. And we're going to maximize the value of the company. As a small company, we don't have the legal protection that some of the larger companies have. So for example, Alcon's the largest company in the world. They operate in 77 different business units around the world. They have Alcon Russia, Alcon China, Alcon India. So when they go in with the technology, they don't have really any issues with worrying about piracy, because they operate out of that country. We don't have that flexibility and we don't have that bandwidth, and it would be very difficult for us to stand that up as an organization. So I avoid it.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And yeah, guys, keep the questions coming. We're going to do our best to get to everyone here. I'm going to go back to some questions just about the lenses themselves.
Yeah.
So this is a question from Dave. He says, regarding presbyopia, will this product alleviate this age-related problem, or will it persist with the new lens?
Oh, great. So it is designed to alleviate presbyopia, myopia, hyperopia, and astigmatism. So those are all the eye conditions that we look at today. And we want to make sure that the technology is able to do. So when we launch our very first lens, we will handle myopia and hyperopia. The second lens, which I can't really talk about, is a astigmatic correcting type lens that will correct astigmatism, myopia, and hyperopia, along with presbyopia. And the cool thing about it, Sean, is once you have this surgery one time, you never have to have it again. It's a lifetime.
Very cool. Here's another one from Mark. In the future, do you think these lenses will be able to help with color blindness?
Wow. So uh, that is a spectrum issue. So depending on the quality of the image that hits the retina, um, you are able, or a patient is able to see and discern between colors. Uh, in order to do that, I just read about yesterday, I just read about a technology that, excuse me, a company that's using nanotechnology to address color blindness, and they're putting it right now. So it's a startup organization too, but they're putting nanotechnology into a contact lens to address color blindness. The challenge that they have noticed so far, like I said, we're all trying to address different problems, is the fact that there are different types of color blindness. So how do you block out one and not deal with the other? So stay tuned, but there's a lot of technologies now. So I'll geek out. So you guys don't know, but I'm a scientist by academic training. So I'm a chemist and a microbiology biologist. And when I hear stuff like that, I look at what Ocumetics is doing, and I always ask myself, if I partnered with that company over there, could we put together something that could address another critical need? And the short answer is, yeah, we could. So I look at I look at where we are as we're just scratching the surface, and there's more to come. And we'll see what happens.
Hey, it's fun to think about. We'll keep going on the lens here. This is a question from Tom. He says, myopia plus astigmatism lens. Is there a realistic ETA on something like that?
Yeah, so the ETA on myopia and hyperopia is the FDA trials. We believe that we will be in and out of the FDA trials probably in uh 29. So we're in 25 going into 26 with human trials. Uh, we think 29, 30 is when our lens, along with a couple other lenses, will get approved. And at that particular point in time, we will have a lens that will address not only myopia, but it will also address hyperopia. During that time, we will also be working on the next generation lens to address astigmatism, because all three of those conditions go together and they affect presbyopia pretty much the same way. You'll have a patient that has low level astigmatism and high myopia, or they'll have low myopia and high astigmatism. So we want to make sure that we address it all.
Gotcha. Okay. This is a question from Scott. It's a bit technical, so forgive me if I say anything wrong.
Yep.
He asks, are you able to elucidate reversibility of the procedure, or is this contingent on further clinical studies? Are
Okay.
there any rejection concerns or potential complications from autoimmune disorders?
Yeah. Cataract surgery is reversible. So let's just say you go through the procedure, they put in the wrong power in the IOL, and it just doesn't work with you. We can go back in surgery and we can take that lens out and equip you with a different lens. So that's not an issue. From a reject perspective, it is what we refer to as a prosthetic implant. So when you do any kind of implantation into the body, you got to make sure that the technology and the material is native to the body. In other words, you don't want the body to flare up, which is why in that 1 day and 7 day period of time, that's all we're looking for. We're looking to see if the body or the eye has had a reaction with the materials. To help us get there is why we do the biocompatibility study. We refer to it as a safety study, but what we're basically looking at is does the animal model reject the materials that we're going to use to make this IOL? And in our particular case, we actually did really well in our animal model biocompatibility study. We actually did better than the uh, test eye or the test lens that we compared ourselves to. So the reject rate should be very low. I won't say never, but the reject rate should be very low. Now, when you say autoimmune issues, that creates a whole different issue. It's a different category, which gets back to what I was saying about if you have glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, corneal diseases, autoimmune type issues. You have to get those things under control first before you should even consider having this type of surgery with this type of lens. Now, if you can't see and you need to have surgery, a monofocal lens works really well. You just have to have reading glasses to go with it. But if all of those issues are under control and you sit down and you map out a plan with your ophthalmologist, you should do really well.
Gotcha. Okay. Here's a question from Vince, who said he has had the pleasure of speaking with Garth Webb in the past.
Yes.
His question is, are we still looking at accommodation speeds of 1/25th of a second? And are we looking at distance corrections down to 2010 or thereabouts?
All right, so we're talking supervision now. Uh, so on the Snellen acuity charts, we typically refer to 20/20 as normal vision. When you start going deeper into the chart with either 2015, 2012.5, 2010, we're approaching what we commonly refer to as eagle vision. All right. To answer that question, you need to give me the rest of the year to do so because you can't answer that question in an animal model. Because I can't sit there with the rabbit. It's a purpose-bred rabbit, but I can't sit there and put him in front of a chart and say which is better, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, because there's no communication back. So if you can give me the rest of this year, I can actually answer that question for you because I'll have 30 subjects that I can evaluate and see that. My evaluation endpoint, working with our regulatory people and working with the ISO standards, which is what the FDA indexes off of, is we want to make sure that all of the patients who go through the study are 20/20 or better. And we will have a subset of patients that do better than 20/20. We'll also have a subset of patients that may even be in that 20/25, 20/30 area. It just really depends. But our goal is to give them and push them to the best optical performance that this technology can provide, which is why we measure every lens, which is why from a manufacturing process, we make sure that that surface, both posterior and anterior, is pristine because we want them to see better than the norm. So the thing that I will sign up for is I want these patients to be 20/20 or better. Now, when you get to 2010, there's some other things that you have to take into consideration that you can't pull out of the lens. As soon as you go into the eye and you put the lens in and you come out, now you have to go through the healing process. We all heal differently. So healing can actually affect optical performance. That's one. The second thing is surgical technique. A doctor's technique. There's some doctors that you might not want to go to. You might not even want to invite them over to cut your grass because they're just not as proficient as other doctors. And so surgical technique can actually affect optical performance. So there are a lot of variables here that we actually can't control in the manufacturing of the product, but we can actually do the best job that we can. So I'll sign up for 2020 or better 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. 2010, that's Eagle Vision. That's really hard to get to. But do we have the potential? Yeah, we have the potential to do that. But I'm not going to sign up for that. I'm going to sign up for 2020 or better.
Gotcha. Okay, here's a question from Jeremy. Is Ocumetics meant to render traditional cataract replacement lenses obsolete? And will insurance potentially cover the operation?
Oh, absolutely. So my goal, so when you start looking at the whole market, uh, part of the challenge with the market is the pricing is all over the map. So when I first came on with Ocumetics, I actually wanted to do what's called a pricing elasticity study, which basically is a study that says what is really the real price and the value associated with this technology. Well, those studies are really, really, really expensive, but there's a different way to actually get to that. So we came up with what we believe is the model and the number for the market. Now, the challenge that we have is to work with the government reimbursed organizations and insurance to make sure that they understand the value of the technology and what it offers patients so that when they start looking at whether or not, number one, they're going to pay for it, but two, how much, we make sure that we work with them to get them there. And then if there is some kind of out of pocket, we refer to that sometimes as balance billing. We make that as low as possible. So what some insurance companies will do, not all, but some will say, hey, we're only going to reimburse you up to this amount, and you are now responsible for the rest. Well, that rest that out of pocket could be much more than what the insurance is paying. So on a $1,000 item, they may only pay $200, and now
Right.
you're responsible for eight. Well, that doesn't feel like it's fair. So we just need to work with the organizations to see if we can get them there. And the cool thing about it is some of the largest companies in this space are doing exactly the same thing. So it's not like Ocumetics has to carry that banner alone. Pricing is everyone's issue.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good follow up to that. This one is from Chris. If a person has already had cataract surgery in the past, will they be able to still have this lens done?
Okay. I get that question a lot. So here's the challenge. It's not the technology. That's not the challenge. The challenge is the lens that you have in your eye, removing that lens out of the eye. So after you have had cataract surgery, the body scars down. And what it does when it scars down is it entraps the IOL and it holds it in place. You don't want an IOL moving all over the place while you're walking, jumping, reading, going to bed. It goes into a different place. It scars down and it's stable. We call it unzip. To unzip that is not an easy proposition for an ophthalmologist. And depending on how long that IOL has been in, your ophthalmologist might not want to do it. Now, do they have tools to allow that to occur? Yeah, they have tools to allow that to occur, but it's not a 5-minute operation. It takes a little time, and you have to bluntly dissect and unzip the IOL, basically freeing it up, and then take it back out, either folding it or cutting it or whatever techniques they use. But it's the conversation you want to have with your ophthalmologist when this technology is available, because I won't sit here and say you can't do that because I've seen it done. What I will say is your doctor will use discretion as to whether or not they want to even attempt it's called an IOL exchange, to do that procedure.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm just going to go back to a question about the private placement here
Yep.
from Duncan. He just wants some clarity on the options, or sorry, the warrants, and then how long until the warrants expire? Duncan, if you just want to go to our website, ocumetics.com, I think the best place to have all that information in one place is just the press release. So go to the investors page. It's the first press release on that page. That'll have everything there. If you do want more information, we'd be happy to reach out to you. So just pop another question in there, and we'll reach out to you directly. Um, let's see what else we got here. Here's a good one. This is from John. So he's asking you, Dean, why did you leave Alcon, where you were so successful, and then given your experience in successfully getting FDA approvals for various medical devices, how do you see the chances of getting an approval for this lens?
Okay. So why did I leave Alcon? After 28 years, we were in the midst of COVID, and I had achieved so much up to that particular point in time. I had to really start evaluating what was important to me. So I retired from Alcon. And because I was pretty high in the organization, I had a non-compete where I had to stay away from the industry for 2 years. So that's kind of my lineage with Alcon. The funny thing about that was when I decided to start my consulting company, Alcon was my largest contract. So they hired me back to consult for them. And it's funny, I was telling my wife, I made more consulting than I got paid on salary doing everything that I was doing with Alcon. So I left because I didn't feel that there was anything else I wanted to try to achieve. Uh, like I said, I got a room full of trophies, and I created markets that didn't even exist way back when. And so I had a good ride. But I'm an ex-basketball player, and I realized that when it's time to hang up the tennis shoes, you hang them up and go do something different. So I left to do that. What was the second part of that question? Oh, the approval.
Yes.
Yeah. So this lens, in my opinion, I came out of retirement to actually do this because this was the most exciting thing that I had seen over that almost 20-year period of time. Has a high level of success with getting approved because of how it works. So even though accommodating technology is new to the FDA, the way we're implementing the technology is very natural, and the FDA will pretty much embrace it, number one. The second thing is my chief medical officer sat on the FDA panel for 10 years. So he knows all the players. And so he's involved in this technology too. So when you have two or three of my leadership team, all with relationships with the FDA, all having had a lot of success with technologies, all being led through a very dynamic group experience, working together. When you have all of those dynamics working so well together, the probability of success is actually really, really, really high. And so FDA approval is not even the thing that's on my list of things that keep me up at night. I feel really good about this one. And like I said, I said I wanted one more. So I get this one, I get a sweet 16, and I'm done. And this is so cool. So I think
Love it.
I don't I don't I don't see an issue with getting this approved.
Love it. Here's a really great question from Normand. In order to have a successful human trial, do all of the patients need to have a successful procedure?
Well, uh, so my off the cuff response is I want every patient to be successful with this technology. So it depends on how you define success. So success in my vision is I don't want there to be any safety or adverse issues with this technology. I don't want there to be any best corrected visual acuity issues. In other words, I want them to be able to see in the distance because we live our world and we frame our world through our vision. And the very first vision that we frame the world with is being able to see in front of our nose and down the street. So we can walk and ride bikes and drive our cars and stuff like that. So I don't want issues there. And I do want them to be able to pick up a card, a reading card, the back of a pharmaceutical, if you will, and be able to read the small print. So success is their ability to do those three things. Now, the thing that's really interesting is you can have a 2020 happy patient, or you could have a 2025 happy patient. It's based on the vision that's coming into the eye that creates whatever the patient is happy or not. So I'm not using the numbers to actually define whether or not the surgery was a success or not. I'm using the ability of the patient to say, oh, I love this vision and I would do it again. So we want visually happy patients. And we want to be able to look at numbers to determine what we do with this technology, because at some point in time, we're going to optimize the technology to make it even better. The numbers help to drive that. So there you
Love
have
it. Here's another question about the first in human. Will we be using a femto laser, which
it.
creates a more exact and reproducible surgery?
Yes. So there are two schools of thoughts. Number one is I agree whoever sent the question in about a more exact. So the femto is going to give us primary and secondary incisions that are just pristine. And it's going to help us to better manage the corneal surface so that we don't have what we call surgically induced astigmatism. But everybody doesn't have a femto laser. So there's another tool out there that's not a laser, but it will give us some of the same things that you can get from a laser. So one of the things the femto will give you is that bag that the lens sits in. We have to zip open the top of that bag and take the cataract out and put the lens in. It's called a capsule rhexis. If anybody on here wants to go look it up, it's called a capsule rhexis. To unzip that, you can do it manually, but oftentimes you will end up with not a homogeneous tear circle. When you use the laser, you get a perfect circle. When you lose this other technology, which I won't mention because I'm still working to sign an agreement with the company to use it in our study. But when you use that technology, you get the same thing, except you don't have to do it with a laser. So we want the surgical introduction of primary, secondary, and capsule rhexis to be pristine.
Gotcha. Here's another one from John. He asks, how many cycles have you subjected this complex movable lens in fatigue tests, and how would it project over the life of the lens?
Yeah, so we just looked at the numbers on our fatigue testing. It was over 1,000 cycles, just strictly for fatigue. So that we could go into our first in human. We will continue to do that type of study because you have to keep in mind, we're putting this in, it's going to be in the patient's eye forever. And we want to make sure that mechanically it doesn't wear out and that it continues to perform the way it was actually designed to perform. So far we've got well over 1,000 cycles on fatigue testing.
Cool. Just a few more questions here, some pretty easy ones. This is from Linda. I've had poor vision all my life. Could these lenses possibly be beneficial for my vision challenges?
It depends on why you've had poor vision. If you grew up as a kid with poor vision and it wasn't related to having a juvenile cataract, so that's a early cataract when you're a little person, but it's centered around something that's happening on the retina, or worse ever, a condition on the cornea called keratoconus. The answer is no. Uh, what you would need to do is to, if it's a retinal issue, make sure that you have a really, really, really good relationship with your retina surgeon. Get a clearance from them so that you can move to cataract surgery and possibly get a better outcome. If it's keratoconus, as the example, which is on the surface, you really need to talk with a corneal specialist, because what they can do for keratoconus now is called cross-linking. So they could cross-link the patient and stabilize the cornea. And then once the cornea is stabilized, you could possibly have a refractive procedure on top of the cross-linking before you have cataract surgery. So there are a number of things, but the very first thing is it depends on why you have bad vision.
Good answer. Here's a good follow-up to that. This is from Carm. Will this lens be able to be used if your eyeglasses correction is 6 or 7 and you also have a cataract in one eye?
Okay, so I'm not an ophthalmologist and I don't want to give clinical advice on this call, and I'm so glad it's being recorded so that I go on record saying I'm not giving clinical advice. If you are high myope, which I assume you are, and you undergo a cataract surgery, chances of a retinal detachment are really, really high. So before you undergo that procedure, make sure you and your ophthalmologist have a really good understanding of your correction. Now, I'm not giving advice, but if this were me, I'd probably elect for a refractive laser procedure like LASIK to normalize the surface and bring down the correction, and then have cataract surgery. And that way, it's a double procedure, but you lessen the chance of having yet a retinal issue, which is the detachment, which is not a good thing to have. So will we have so maybe the question should be, will we have the range to correct 7 diopters? And the short answer is we're going to have this wide range of lenses available. So from 19 to probably 31 diopters. So that's a refractive range. So that's a full complement of lenses. Within those lenses, we will be able to, once we get into the multi-center clinical trial and commercialization, be able to give patients up to 3.5 diopters worth of accommodative amplitude, which are 2 different numbers. I said it on a call that we only gave 3.5 diopters worth of accommodation, and there was an ophthalmologist that was on the call that said that's not even going to cover a fraction of the range. We have the full range of 19 to 32. But in terms of accommodative amplitude, it's 3.5 diopters. And those lenses will be able to address hyperopia, myopia, and the next version will be able to address astigmatic type correction. So stay tuned.
Gotcha. Just a couple more questions here and we can wrap things up.
Okay.
This one is from Robert. He says, what would lead you and Dr. Webb to consider selling Ocumetics?
The right discussion.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think you already kind of touched on this, but this is a question from Lane. What do you assume the stock price will be when the FDA is done and you have a commercial product?
Oh, wow. So we kind of addressed, so Dayton had a question that was very similar, but I took Dayton's question based on first in human. That's where I got the $1 or
Yeah,
3x.
yeah.
By the time we get through the multi-center clinical trial, uh, it would be my guess here again, crystal ball kind of looking. I'm kind of staring out in space here in my house. It would be my guess that we would be at that $3 area. And so those that got in early at 12 cents or 31 cents and now 35 cents, if we got to the $2.50, $3 range, oh my God, that's a 10x turn on their money. I mean, that's a great investment.
That's what we all dream of.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and then very last question. I thought this is a great one to wrap things up. This one is from Pete. He says he's been following the company for a long time. He's very excited, but he says that he noticed we're both wearing glasses. So his question is, are we both considering the lens technology for ourselves?
Okay. So do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I mean, this is about the only one I can speak to. So, no, absolutely. I mean, I wear glasses a lot. And then I also wear contacts a lot. I'm an athlete. I play golf a lot. And I'm sure anyone who wears contacts knows how frustrating and annoying contacts can be. Dry eyes, they fall out of your eye. So, no, just in terms of athletics, that would be my number one interest is to get one of these things in your eye. And then you just have perfect vision again and you never really have to worry about it. So, no, it's one of those futuristic things that, you always look to the future to solve your problems, and we're doing it. We're part of it. So absolutely.
Excellent. So Pete, I and Sean, I'm going to speak for you for 1 second, okay?
Yeah.
Sean is not old enough to have a cataract procedure.
That's fair.
So he's got to play around with glasses, contact lenses, and possibly refractive surgery until he gets to that ripe old age of 45, 50, 55 years of age. Then he can start thinking about the Ocumetics technology. The benefit to him is that technology will be available. And so he gets to make that choice when he does. Now, I'm a lot older than Sean, and I won't say what my age is because most of you guys won't believe me, but I was able to go through full retirement based on government numbers and being with Alcon. So I am actually fully retired. I had cataract surgery last year. So my vision is 2015 in my left eye, 2020 in my right eye. I had the best lens that was commercially available, which is called Panoptics. So I'll put it out. It's a trifocal, so it gave me distance, intermediate, and near. Best lens ever, except nighttime visual disturbances are real. I have ghosting, halos, starbursts, everything you can imagine happens to me when the lights go out. And there for a while when I was healing, I couldn't even drive at night. It was that bad. So, somewhere around in the summertime, 7:30, 8 o'clock, I made sure that I was at home because car lights and street lights bothered me really bad. But I had Panoptics. That's the best lens commercially available, and it's very expensive. So I bit the bullet to do that. Now, the reason I wear glasses is this eye. Um, so we have muscles in our eyes that keep them rotated and oriented in a straight fashion. This eye rotates out every once in a while when I get tired. So I don't have refraction in my glasses. I have a prism in this lens here that allows me to keep everything aligned. I could actually have a procedure to do that, but we typically do that on babies and young children. And the success rate is 80, 85, 90% on kids. It's a 40% success rate on adults. So I choose not to have surgery, and I'm not surgical adverse, but I choose not to have surgery, just deal with it with one prism. And this, you could actually pop this lens out, and I would have to keep this one because that brings everything in alignment. But that's why I wear glasses. It's not because I can't see. I've got really good vision now with my Panoptics, but I have nighttime visual disturbances that just drive me crazy. And uh, when I talk to my ophthalmologist, I tell him all the time, you know, you're a good doctor, but that company that made that technology, they didn't do such a good job, which is the company I retired from. That's Alcon's. I have Alcon's lenses in my eyes.
Got you. And just a follow up. So how would the Ocumetics lens handle those halos and starbursts?
Yeah. So I don't want to get, well, yes, I do. Um, if you could give me 1 second, Sean, I want to
Yeah,
show the group something.
yeah.
If I still have it. Yep. So I'm going to make this slide visible. I didn't want to geek out on you guys. Okay, so this lens right here on the right-hand side, Sean, can you see that?
I can't.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me go back to sharing. Yeah, I'll show you.
There we
Okay,
go.
so can you see this lens where my pointer is right here on where the
Yes.
red circle is?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a Panoptics lens. Every one of those concentric circles, all the way out to the edge, gives the patient a different vision based on where the light image is hitting one of those rings. So if it hits it right in the middle here, that's where you get your near. When you hit in the middle part, that gives you your intermediate. And when you hit way out here, that gives you your distance vision. The problem with that is what we refer to as light scatter. Light comes in and it hits these little rings, and that's where you get all the scatter. So the difference between the Ocumetics lens and this is the best lens that's currently on the market, is this thing is so smooth, the light doesn't have a chance to scatter. The light rays come into the eyes and they come in a nice homogeneous way. And so you don't get ghosting, halos, and light scatter. You don't get any of that stuff. So we call those nighttime visual disturbances. And it's the way it was designed. So I can't say clinically, but the way it was designed, it was to eliminate all of those issues.
Great. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, and we don't have these steps. So these are called steps. And the technology, for those that want to go look it up, is called diffractive optics. And that's what this is. It's a diffractive optic. So,
Cool.
all right. So
Okay.
can we end on that one?
Yeah, that's it. I just want to remind everybody, if you guys have more questions, please feel free to go to our website, contact us, send us any questions you might have. You can also visit the investor page to get all the newest updates on our first in human and the private placement. Also, you can reach out to us if you're interested in that private placement. I've got everyone's emails here. We will contact you if you ask to. And then lastly, if you want to go back and watch the webinar, it should be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. And yeah, I'll leave it to you, Dean, to wrap things up.
All right. So I want to continue to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of this journey. We're only halfway there. We still have a few more years to go, but we are closer to commercialization than we were when this was a napkin drawing. and you guys invested in the company back then. So I want to thank you for believing in Dr. Webb. I want to thank Dr. Webb for even having the vision to put some type of technology like this together. And then he had the grit to stay with it over 18 years. So I'm living in the shadows of a lot of effort and a lot of work that's been done. And I just want to say thank you guys for doing that. I hope these types of fireside chats, warm discussions are beneficial for you guys. I try to make them different each and every time we do it. The functional reality is we have a great technology. I came out of retirement personally to drive this thing into the market. I really believe in the technology. Had I not had surgery when I did, I would have this technology in my eye when it was available. Absolutely. In fact, I would have even considered being one of the test subjects for early surgery in our human studies, but I don't qualify because I've already got my lenses in. But for those of you who are interested in clinical studies, just kind of stay close to the website. We try to put as much content and information on our website as we can. You can always reach out to us. My email is dean.burns@ocumetics.com. I try to answer as many emails as I can. Sometimes it takes me a day or two to get back, but that's only because I'm trying to raise money and trying to put this in a human eye. So I'm a little busy. And then when I'm not doing that, I go walk around my neighborhood because I just need to get away from the computer and the phone. So thank you so much for being a part of this, Sean. You did a great job. Thanks for helping to set this up. And with that, we'll close out. We'll see you guys later.
Awesome. Thanks, Dean. See you, everybody.